Hi, Cassandra. It's Kristen. I am going to be giving you feedback on your creative submissions, your poetry that you submit each week in the form of a video, similar to this one. So let me know if you have any questions about that. I did want to say thank you so much for the work that you submitted this week. It's clear that you spent some time with the prompts, thinking about them and creating new work. So thank you so much for doing that. I feel like it gives me an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better, to get to know your poetic voice, that unique poetic voice that is yours. Let's start with the I am from, prompt number one. So I did notice that a few of the lines from the Mary Pfeiffer poem were not changed to your own work. So the very first line, I'm from Avis and Frank, Agnes and Fred, Glessy, May, and Mark. I have a feeling that those are not your ancestors' names. Those are Mary Pfeiffer's ancestors' names. So moving forward with this poem, you would want to change those. And there's a few other things. I'm from Schwinn's Girls, a Schwinn Girls bike. That is the same exact line, the same exact example that Mary Pfeiffer uses. Even if you did have a Schwinn's Girl bike, what we want to do is we want to replace that with your own unique example. So we're using Mary Pfeiffer's poem as a framework, but we don't want to use her individual examples in our own work. So moving forward with this poem, if you would replace those and keep an eye on it, that would be great. I do think that your adaptation of her poem is wonderful. I think you use fantastic examples that really give a sense of who you are and where you're coming from and what your background is like. So I enjoyed reading it. I also was excited to see the juxtaposition of Charlotte Bronte, Walt Whitman, and Fleetwood Mac, because woo-ha Stevie Nicks. I just love her. I also, I really liked your poem number 2. I liked where you went with it. I like that it's in the first person. I am, I sit, I pull my words this moon. I like that it starts that way, and then there's this particular shift about halfway through the poem where you change, you sort of change the speaker of the poem, change the perspective of the poem, the narrative distance of the poem. And so I want to make sure that that is an intentional decision, and it happens right about here. Sometimes come as grains of salt, but this moon in the sky has a real serene feeling. So do you hear that shift? It goes from I am, I sit, I pull to this moon in the sky has a feeling. So I want to make sure that that narrative shift is intentional. And I think that the other thing that I would suggest is I want you to watch out for cliches in your poems, those lines that are overused. If you're not familiar with the term cliche, you can read about it on our literary terms worksheet or just Google it. It's just words and phrases that are overused, especially in literature. So especially in novels, especially in poems. So one of those that I would bring your attention to is it takes my breath away. What's another way that you could say that? What's a way that you can say that that's uniquely yours? So I want you to play with that a little bit for your next edit of the poems. How do you say it takes my breath away? And what do you mean by that, right? Because it becomes cliches, these cliched phrases. They're sort of stand-ins, they're placeholders for what we really want to say because it's the most immediate thing that pops into our head because we've heard it so many times. So thank you so much for your work this week. I'm super excited to see where you go with your next edits of these poems, and I'm really looking forward to reading this week's work.